Glad you're here for this training camp edition of Bills by the Numbers, where we let the stats tell you where the Bills are at. We're presented by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Coming up, what positions will prove difficult to whittle down for the 53-man roster, and which positions could use a depth piece? And we'll have our one burning question. Who's pumped for the preseason? We're ramping up for the preseason here on Bills by the Numbers. Bills Wall of Famer Steve Tasker, Bills insider Chris Brown with you. And as the preseason fast approaches, we make some early assessments of Buffalo's training camp roster in these three things. Thing number one, Steve, after watching this Bills squad in training camp through the first week, what position do you think might prove difficult to whittle down when the coaching staff has to reduce the roster to 53 on August 27th?
For me, it's the offensive line. They got guys that can really play. You could win games with their second five, I think. That's how good they are. I think they've got some experience back there, guys with some chops, and they could hang in there enough, particularly with this roster and this quarterback. They could win games with the second five. The first five, if they can stay healthy like they did last year, I think there's going to be times, they're not playing in a vacuum, so it's not going to happen every week, but there are going to be games where they dominate. There are going to be games like the Dallas game last year when Josh said, I didn't have to do anything. He just turned around and handed it off. There are going to be games like that with this offensive line. So that's where it is for me. I think they're deep, they're talented, and they're experienced.
Before I get to my position, my biggest issue, and it's a good dilemma to have, is at the tackle position on that offensive line that you mentioned, because I think we're all assuming Ryan Vandemark, who served as the swing tackle last year, unless he falls on his face, is probably going to have that position again this year behind Spencer Brown and Deion Dawkins. But then you go to your fourth tackle, that's Lyle Collins, the 7-year veteran, who's been a starter in this league pretty much since he got here. Now, I don't think he moves like he used to. He's got a big brace on his left leg all through camp. I'll be interested to see how he performs in the preseason. And Aaron Kromer, the offensive line coach, has been cross-training him at guard as well. But then you have the 6th-round pick, Tylen Grable, right behind him. And you can't put him on the practice squad. He's not going to last there.
He's gone, yeah.
So do you keep 5 tackles on this year's offensive line for the 53-man roster? I think you kind of have to.
Yeah, I mean, Grable will be gone. He is such an athlete at the size that he is, and he's looked really good in practice, really good. Do you take? And here's the dilemma.
And he's been cross-training at guard too.
Right,
just
you
so
feel
people
like
know.
you feel like those guys. So both guys can play. Who's got the biggest upside? It's got to be Grable. And you think, okay, he may not be up to speed right away, but how fast can he get there? And do you put him on the roster
and then he's inactive every week?
Let his inactive in every week, and wait until, and then by the time he is ready, then you need him, or he's ready before you need him.
Yeah.
In this season, if an injury rash happens, Vandermark will go on first.
Right, but you know what?
But here's the thing:
they did that exact thing with Vandemark 2 years ago. He made the 53-man roster and sat on it. He was inactive almost every week unless they needed him.
Right, but you got Lyle Collins sitting there, who can step in and play like a light switch.
Yeah.
But Grable is an intriguing prospect who could have a very long and very productive career.
My position that I think is going to be difficult to whittle down is defensive end. Because you have 2 young players there who show a lot of promise. And again, I don't think you can put on the practice squad. So at edge, you have Von Miller, you have A.J. Epinesa, you have Greg Rousseau, and then you have Dewan Smoot, who I think is a very astute veteran pickup, similar to Leonard Floyd. Now, he's not going to be a 10.5 sack guy. I think this is a guy that's going to help you in the run front and a guy you can even move inside to play defensive under tackle, in a pinch. So his versatility is valuable, and I think he's unquestionably on the roster. So that, if you're counting Smoot as an end, that's 4 right there. And then you have Kingsley Jonathan and Javon Solomon, the 5th-round draft choice. And I think in a perfect world, you want to keep both. And again, we're in this dilemma where if you put one of those guys on the practice squad, A, B, see you later. They're going to get poached.
Right.
So to me, that's going to be a difficult one to whittle down, and the preseason will probably have a lot to say about that. I mean, if you think about it, 2 years ago, the Bills put Kingsley Jonathan on the practice squad, and Chicago signed him to their active roster immediately. And fortunately, the way things worked out, they were able to get him back. He was on the roster last year, but now you've got Javon Solomon here as part of the equation too. I mean, I could see them keeping 5, but not 6. And so then it becomes a question of, are you just going to designate Smoot a defensive tackle and use him at end on rundowns, and you're keeping 10, but 6 are technically ends, and you only keep 4 defensive tackles? I think that might be the way they have to go going forward, because that's going to be a difficult one to whittle down too. Thing number 2, which position might appear a bit thin and in need of at least a depth piece before we reach the regular season?
For me, it's got to be safety. We saw Cole Bishop not finish practice on Tuesday. Mike Edwards is already out. They've signed a guy. Then they signed Burgess. It's safety for me. Yeah,
I get it, and let's hope that position does not become a revolving door of players. I mean, you have players who know the system towards the front end of the depth chart in Taylor Rapp, DeMar Hamlin, Cam Lewis.
Sure.
But beyond that, you've got guys relatively new to the system. Edwards on the shelf with a hamstring injury week to week, and then Bishop on the injury list now too. So, that's a little bit of a concern. You have Kareem Jackson in the fold and Burgess, to your point.
Both are
who signed on
brand
Wednesday.
new, so they're going to take some time just to learn the words.
Yeah. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And I would say the other position for me is also in the secondary. It's at corner, because while I like the top 3,
4 with Taryn.
Well, 4, Taryn. Yeah. I'm talking outside corner here.
Right.
But yes, Taryn Johnson on the roster. And Cam Lewis, essentially his backup as well. But on the outside, boundary corner, or field corner, however you want to categorize it, I like the top 3 a lot. Christian Benford, Rasul Douglas, Kyer Elam. Behind them, though, is Jamarcus Ingram, who's played in 2 career games. And could he be the Dane Jackson that fill that role as the 4th corner? Sure. But I want to see him in the preseason first. Behind those 4, though, Kyron Brown, who was on the practice squad last year, and then you've got rookies after that. Kenai Lovely, and you've also got
Hardy.
Yeah, Daquan Hardy. So I think how they play in the preseason is largely going to determine whether or not they feel they have to add some veteran there. And there are names out there. I mean, let's not make any mistake about it. I don't think they're going to go out and sign a Stephon Gilmore, but, I think you might need somebody with at least a couple of years under their belt in the league just to serve as a depth piece going forward if these rookies and Jamarcus Ingram and Kyron Brown don't take a step in their own development through the course of the preseason. Thing number 3, what player on the roster has exceeded expectations based on what you thought of their game prior to training camp?
I don't want to pump tires, and I don't want to get everybody going, all right, cool, yeah, because this guy's got a long way to go. But the guy who's exceeded my expectations is simply Matt Milano. I thought they would wrap him in bubble wrap and take it very slow. He is out there in pad, and he's taking a vet day. Yeah. He's been in pads. He's running around. He's playing really well. I don't think he feels or is playing exactly like he did, but he is on the field taking reps with the number 1 defense. And I thought it would be a slower progress for him.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been. When he's out there, he's out there. And I think that's as pleasant a surprise and a kind of a reassuring presence for me.
I think the next question is, how and where is he going to fit into preseason games? Because knowing his process, I think he's going to want to get a ramp-up game in somewhere before they hit the field against Arizona in week 1. The question becomes, when does the medical staff and the athletic training staff and the coaching staff and Matt himself feel it's best to drop him into a preseason game situation.
I would probably say he'll be fine rotating on the bench. He won't, whether he wants to or not. He's not going to get any time.
You don't think he's going to get any preseason time?
No. The guy's a 5-year vet, and he's an all-pro. You can sit down and watch.
7-year vet.
7-year vet, and he's an all-pro. Just sit down and take it easy. You're fine.
Right.
Take an extra day of practice. Skip a vet rest day then. And we'll see how you do with some extra work. But
so you say no preseason for
absolutely
Milano.
no preseason for him.
Okay, fair enough. For me, it's Keon Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
I had pretty lofty expectations for Keon Coleman based on what his physical skill set is. Where he has exceeded my expectations is in the mental part of the game. I'll admit, and this is due to not knowing his game well enough, just from not having seen it up close and personal on a daily basis. But having seen it through the spring and now through a week of training camp, his football IQ is far higher than I ever imagined it would be. Because we've said this before, Steve, outside of quarterback and maybe middle linebacker, receiver is probably the next hardest position to learn as a rookie in the NFL, right? That's fair.
Yeah. Yes, because it's not just about the X's and O's and adjustments and all that. It's also about a relationship with the guys throwing the football.
Yeah.
You have to learn him. The receiver has to learn him. And they say the quarterback has to learn where his receivers are, but actually the receiver has to learn the quarterback because he's the guy.
Right.
He doesn't have time to think about what you want. You got to think about what he wants. And that's hard to do.
And I think through the first week of camp, we can say that there is a clear on-field chemistry between Allen and Coleman, and I think it's rooted in Coleman's ability not only to process the information of the scheme, but to execute it on the field at a speed necessary to be effective in the passing game, whether it's recognizing what the coverage is, recognizing where the defensive back he's going against has help or leverage advantages, and exploiting where the weaknesses are and getting open for his quarterback. He has been really, really good at that.
The hard part of playing receiver is the ball is snapped and you've got a route to run, but you've got adjustments during the route that you're going at full speed. And if you see the defensive back and the secondary does something unexpected after the snap, which Poyer and Hyde were so good at doing, you have to know instantly that you have to snap your route off and hook it up or take it deep or take a different angle or break it a different direction because it's a route that calls for that adjustment. You got to know that, and it's hard. It's hard to do on the fly at full speed, particularly when you've got an elite athlete hanging on your back, like Kyer Elam and Christian Benford. So it's hard to do all of that, and it's a lot. But you're right. He has obviously been prepared very well for this level of football, and he seems to take to it pretty quickly. I was surprised by that as well.
Yeah. It's an encouraging sign for Buffalo's passing game going forward. Hopefully it carries effectively into the preseason and then the regular season. We move ahead now to the numbers game where Steve will be quizzed on Buffalo's run game. And basically this deals chiefly with 2023 numbers from last season. So we begin with question number 1. The Bills finished 7th overall in rushing last season, Steve. Where do you think they ranked in rushing yards under Ken Dorsey through the first 10 games? Finished the year 7th overall in rushing. Where do you think they ranked during those first 10 games under Dorsey?
I'll say right at the middle of the pack. I don't want to say 16. I don't know. I think they're worse than 16th.
They were better than that. 11th in the league.
Okay.
116 and a half yards per game. Okay, so I just gave you a hint here. 116 and a half yards rushing per game under Dorsey. Question number 2, what do you think the Bills' rushing yards per game average was under Joe Brady over the last 7 games of the
I'd
season?
say 130.
It's a little higher than that. You want to take a second shot at it?
I don't think it's $150. I'll say 135.
149 and a half yards per game rushing.
150.
It's a difference of 33 yards per game.
Man, that's a lot of yards on the ground.
They ranked 8th in the league over that span.
Yeah.
Question number...
They were 7th overall for the season.
Yes.
Oh,
No,
okay.
they were Yes, 7th overall. You're correct. Right. Yes. Question number 3. Under Joe Brady, where do you think the Bills ranked in rushing first downs down the stretch last season? Rushing first downs. First downs gained by running the football.
And Brady, I say first.
They were first in the league, indeed. You are correct. 76 first downs
they could,
by running the football over the last 7 games.
This offense is going to be a wagon again.
That's 10 a game.
They're gonna do it again this year. They're going to be tough to stop.
And just to give you an idea how good it was, that was 3 more than San Francisco had over the last 7 games of the season.
Josh gives you a little bit of a boost in that, no question about it.
He does.
But, man,
let's not forget, a lot of his runs were down by the goal line. Like, they weren't getting first downs.
Yeah, some of them. He didn't have he had a lot of touchdown runs, but none of them were 1-yard runs. They were like
there were
8
a few.
yard. There was a couple, but most of his touchdown runs were outside the 5-yard line.
Yeah. Last question, Steve. Under Joe Brady last season, where do you believe the Bills ranked in third down conversion percentage when they ran the ball?
Oh, only when they ran the ball? Well, I'll say they got to be number 1.
They were number 1 again?
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
Conversion rate, 70%. Yeah!
They're tough, man.
Tops in the league.
They are tough.
So don't think that the run game's going away. It may not be 52% run like it was over the last 7 games of the season last year, but it's going to be a part of what they do.
It is. And I'll say this, too. It's a problem for defense, too. I'll say this, and not for nothing. They don't turn it over when they run the ball. You just don't do that very much. Once in a while, you'll have a guy cough it up, but it's hard to get the ball out of those running backs' hands. And when you're getting first downs, I remember we were standing on the side of way back in the day in the night. And I'm standing back there, and we're tearing some team up, and Thurman is just crushing. He's a Hall of Famer, and and our offensive line is big, strong. They're just grinding it.
Yeah.
And I'm standing next to Frank Reich, and he goes, when you can run the ball, the other team is defenseless.
Yeah, powerless.
There's nothing you can do.
Powerless.
They're pushing you again. You
just
can't
bully ball.
You can't get stronger. You can't get bigger. You can put more bodies in there. If that doesn't, you're done. You're defenseless.
Well, you just gotta hope you can rip the ball out. Or something.
You gotta hope they make a mistake. And that is a sad, hopeless place to be, man. It is a sad, hopeless place to be. It is that you want to talk about demoralizing a team. You watch a sideline when they're getting their heads caved in with the run game. Yeah. They're over there, just stand there. They're just blank.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do. And as an offense, the offensive line.
Oh, love it. Give it to him again.
You could turn on a lighthouse with the electricity in the huddle.
Well, saw
those guys. Are like,
saw
let's go, man.
We saw it in the Dallas game last year.
Yeah. It's something else.
Keep giving it to Jimbo.
And as a fan, I was the same way. Fans in the stands in the Dallas game, we were all like going, man, I don't know. Can you really keep doing it?
Can you really by the second half, it's like, do it again. Do it again.
Yeah. It was, I'm telling you, and that's why teams, first and foremost, you got to stop the run. It is the truth. And teams and you get guys out of the college that's the same way. You spend a lot of time on it, and it's about fitting up in the run. Because at this level, it's rare that you overpower teams. It's rare because they can bear up. But when you get a team that's got a couple of injuries, got a guy that can't hold up or can't play the right technique, and you can exploit it,
or you're worried about this quarterback over here throwing it all over the yard on you. And
yeah,
you got little people on the field.
Yeah, it's disheartening. It's disheartening.
Bills fans, get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Just download the app today and play any way you want. Plus, with live betting, you'll get updated odds on games that have already started. Best of all, you get paid your winnings fast. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the Buffalo Bills. Time to contemplate our one burning question. What part of the team needs to show up in the preseason, Steve, to make you feel like the Bills are a complete team?
It's a good question. I've been high on the offense since day one of training camp. Even before training camp, I was high on them. So it would be, and I don't know how generalized I want to get the entire. You want to see how the defense shows up because there's been so much turnover. I got to say probably the second. If I'm going to get hone it down and fine tune it, it'd probably be. I was going to say either the pass rush or the secondary.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with the secondary.
like preventing the big play, what this secondary's
Get
kind
some
of been
passes,
known for,
defense, make the
takeaways.
quarterback go to his second read. Just play well against the pass. The pass rush is also right there at the top of my list. You know, and that's why I started, and maybe probably the defense if they show up and play well. But I think if I got to really put it to a fine point, it's got to be the secondary's got to play well. You got Kyer, Christian Benford, Rasul Douglas, and Taryn at corners, but the safety position is
a little in
huge question mark.
It's a little
right
in
now,
flux right now.
especially right now in the early preseason.
I think it's got to show up, yeah.
Yeah.
And since you took that, I will take the pass rush because while there are some familiar names there, the questions remain. Is Von Miller going to look like old Von Miller? We're getting encouraging signs through the first week of training camp, especially early in the second week, that Von's burst is back. You heard Deion Dawkins say his aura is back. Those are encouraging signs. Is Greg Rousseau going to have that breakout year this year? He's been a solid, steady player for them, a good player for them. Can he be great? Can A.J. Epinesa, after encouraging play last season as a rotational player, can he take another step and give you periods of dominance at times and take over a game for you, win a game for you? And what can those young up-and-coming pass rushers do for you in Kingsley Jonathan and Javon Solomon? I think those, if you get even two of those four answers,
right,
you could have a really complete team that's even better than people are bargaining for the Bills. Our closing figure deals with what Steve talked about, Buffalo's pass defense. When it came to passer rating against, the Bills ranked seventh in the NFL with a mark of 81.9, opposer passer rating. That was even better than Kansas City's defense, which many thought helped carry the Chiefs to their third Super Bowl title in the Mahomes-Reed era. The Bills will face 3 opponents this season who ranked higher than Buffalo in passer rating against last season. San Francisco, who finished 4th, Jets, who finished 3rd, and Baltimore, who was best in the league with an opponent passer rating of just 74.6. That'll do it for this edition of Bills by the Numbers. Be sure to subscribe on whatever podcast platform you use so you know when our next episode is out for you to enjoy. Because when you need to know about the Bills, you need to check Bills by the Numbers. For Steve Tasker, I'm Chris Brown. We'll catch you next week, everybody.